Hello! So today we're talking about permaculture, alternative economics, and capitalism. I believe that permaculture, by definition, is anti-capitalist, and in this short video, I'm going to explain why. So when we talk about capitalism, we think first thing is this big picture Wal-Mart, and everybody's working for the man, and everyone's paying all their money in taxes, and all you get in return is just a bunch of junk and a bunch of debt, and you take that to your grave. So this is what capitalism sort of looks like on the ground, and it's very easy to put a label on that. But then when we get into talking about alternative economics, then right away the first thing that you will encounter are these 8 forms of capital oh, it's not just about money. There's lots of different ways to accrue capital and lots of different ways to feel wealthy, to become wealthy through your work with the land, through your work with the community. You create social capital and spiritual capital, and you accrue biological capital, and you surround yourself with plants, etc., etc. But it rarely does the conversation go beyond that. So I just want to challenge the notion of capital at all, and this idea that we need to get things and we need to have things and to own things, and assert that permaculture, that if we're serious about creating a sustainable community, if we're serious about integrating with nature and being regenerative with our projects and regenerative with our actions, then that work by definition is anti-capitalist. So we talk about 8 kinds of capital, which connect to 8 kinds of currency, complexing to 8 types of natural resources, which make up the core source of the energy of what we're getting. It all came from somewhere. Even if we're talking about alternative currencies, it's still capitalism. So social capital, material capital, financial capital, living capital, intellectual capital, experiential capital, spiritual capital, and cultural capital. Now, 2 of these things are very different than the rest, in that material and financial capital are somehow, for some reason, valued higher, and people who have more material and financial capital are granted access to fancier houses, better health care, better education, and so on. And these 2 forms of capital also happen to be the 2 that you run out of if you give away too much. So they don't regenerate. These are non-regenerative forms of capital. Now, the rest of these, the more you give, the more you get. So if we're talking about connections, and we're talking about elements and ideas and actions and intentions and stories and songs and rituals, you don't run out of those. If you're sharing those with your community, they just keep making more and more and more. And these are regenerative. So what we're doing, for the most part in mainstream culture, is we're taking all of these regenerative energies and we're translating and mutating everything into these 2 non-regenerative energies. And then we're turning that into cash money, basically, and real estate, property. And we're using that to then buy all of these other types of experiences, social experiences, living experiences, education, intellectual connections, spiritual experiences. And so much is lost. Massive amounts of energy are being lost in the conversion. And we're literally wasting our time, and the earth is dying while we're at it. So this is the pattern that we need to disrupt if we're to change our relationship with the planet on which we live. So with capitalism, accruing wealth is all about taking these natural resources, turning them into non-material currencies, and then translating that into buildings and money and land and real property. So now if we're talking about anti-capitalism, then we're looking at the opposite of the pyramid. So instead of taking natural resources, we are regenerating natural resources. And instead of tapping into the community and trying to turn that into money, we're freely giving resources to the community and making sure that people have what they need. And we're also taking care of ourselves and prioritizing things like personal relationships and education and things that get marginalized in a capitalist culture. And then as we go further down, into the most anti-capitalist part of the pyramid. Then we move all the way into things like decolonization, giving the land back to native people, degrowth, depaving, taking buildings down, returning cities to wilderness, and even voluntary human extinction, and or just eschewing fecundity and focusing on perpetuating non-human species rather than only ourselves. So it's important to remember that if we're talking about permaculture and we're truly serious about being regenerative, we have to emphasize non-human species as much as we're emphasizing ourselves. So if you look closely, even this work that we're calling regenerative, from here up, a lot of it's about humans. And so we need to be honest about that in our design work, and we need to make sure that we're striking a balance. And so how does this tie back into alternative economies? It has to do with the way we look at the world and the way we establish whether or not something is a commodity. Now, what does this have to do with permaculture? Let me show you. So if you look in closer, what do we have here? We have earth care. Permaculture ethic number 1. This is what we see here. We're taking care of the earth and we're generating natural resources. Okay, and now let's look at the second tier. What do we have here? People care. You see it? Taking care of each other, taking care of ourselves. So people care is really important, and this is our second ethic. And it just lines right up with these anti-capitalist ideals. And now, what does that leave? The third ethic. That pesky third ethic. I would assert, as I have before, that the third ethic is about taking care of non-human species. It's about paying it forward for future generations, but not just for future generations of ourselves. And that's where we get to the most anti-capitalist part of it. So if we look at this and we remember that permaculture is about 3 ethics and not just 1, then we see that permaculture is, by definition, anti-capitalist. Okay, so in summary, let me just wrap up what I'm trying to say here. So if capitalism is about taking these core resources, converting them to currency, converting that currency to capital, trickling that down into material and financial capital, and that's leading to total destruction, then anti-capitalism, perhaps, and permaculture, by extension, would have the exact opposite pattern. So that means we would start with the destruction, we would start with the waste, we would find resources, we would slowly start to convert that back into capital, which we turn back into currency, which we turn back into natural resources. So if we collect money from the capitalist culture, we turn it into other types of capital, and we create opportunities for others, and we plant trees, and we save seeds, and we take these amazing actions that don't benefit us financially, they do benefit other species, then perhaps we can shift this toxic culture that capitalism has become. So there you go. That's my theory, and I welcome comments, critique, and feedback. I look forward to seeing you. Come find us on Facebook. It's facebook.com/groups/freepermaculture. And also just come to freepermaculture.com where there's lots of resources for you. Talk to you soon.